Staff Sergeant Reverent Pelletier, Perseus Union Marine Corps and attached to the Congress of Humanity's Home Guard, leaned back in his web seat and closed his eyes. As usual, when the Home Guard was called out, it was a mad rush of activity, and he hadn't had any sleep for going on 30 hours. If he thought he'd be able to catch a few quick Z's, however, he was sorely mistaken. The Millsap combat shuttle looked a couple of centuries old, and it was jumping around like a cat on a leash. Rev had been lucky so far during his time in the Home Guard. He'd been deployed aboard the Mesami Concordat Navy Takagahara, a ship that pushed the technical and comfort boundaries beyond even those of the Hegemony Liberté Navy. The MS Red Dragon did not, and that was putting it lightly. The transit had been crowded and uncomfortable, the air conditioning hit and miss. With so many bodies in the confined spaces, the temperatures skyrocketed. Couple that with food fabricators that kept breaking down and heads not flushing, well, as Bob, Staff Sergeant Schwertzelin of the Frisian Mantle Host, said, the conditions were so bad that everyone welcomed getting off the pile of junk and reaching the planet's surface, no matter what the situation was down there. Rev gave up and opened his eyes. He looked to his left where Corporal Charles Akiki was sitting and glared at him, as if the trooper was responsible for his nation's ships. Akiki was a good trooper, and he excelled in zero-G operations. It suddenly clicked with Rev. Of course he's good in zero-G. He has to be. I bet they don't know from 1 hour to the other if their ships are going to fall apart around them. The shuttle suddenly dropped as if in free fall. Then a moment later, heavier G's pushed Rev into his seat, causing his famously delicate stomach to lurch up his throat. He had to swallow down the bile and fight losing it right then and there. "Antiemetics now." "Initiating," his battle buddy said. "As I told you before leaving the Red Dragon, they work better if they are administered before the symptoms are advanced." This wasn't the first time Rev had heard that, but there was a stubborn streak that kept him from giving in so easily. He was heavily augmented, one of the deadliest humans alive, and he couldn't keep his lunch down. He knew Punch was right, though, and as his meta-nanos flooded his body with the drugs, his stomach began to feel normal. He barely hiccuped as the shuttle bounced even harder. 5 minutes until we land. Look sharp. Appearances matter." Second Lieutenant Bundy, the first platoon commander and one of Rev's longtime friends, passed over the platoon net. Rev frowned, but he knew Bundy was right. The situation on the ground was tense, ready to ignite again at the slightest provocation. The hope was that the arrival of Home Guard troops would throw some water on the burning embers. These were the kinds of missions that every soldier hated, where danger was ever present, but the rules of engagement were such that they were limited in what they could do, firing only if fired upon. Fox Company's last mission, the one on Cat Scratch, had been just such a mission, and as a result 2 troopers in second squad had been killed, one of them past resurrection. Burdened by Pashu's bulk, Rev was in his customary position as the last seat on the starboard side, so he wasn't banging into his fellow troopers. In this case, that put him closest to the tiny window just aft of the last seat. He took advantage of that to look out as they descended. The planet, a lush bluish-green, was looming large. He couldn't see the LZ yet from where the Home Guard was supposed to establish a presence, but soon enough they'd landed what would be their home for the next month at a minimum. The blue in the jungle was a sure sign that Tion X4 had retained far more native vegetation and wildlife than planets like Rev's own safe harbor. The planet's sun was an F-type star, so the native vegetation and vegetation analogs tended to reflect more blue light. While the planet was terraformed to support human life, most of those efforts were around the mines in the geographical far north, where the sun's output was less per meter squared. Out here, closer to the equator, where the planet was largely uninhabited until the recent discovery of valuable heavy element deposits, the native land had remained fallow. This was the first time Rev was going to experience a real alien world. Sort of, at least. If peace broke out and they weren't needed, at least he'd be seeing something new. He just started to turn back around when a flash filled the sky in the interior of the shuttle. There was a jerk, then they banked hard to the left. Rev's stomach jumped into his throat as he latched Pashu on the edge of his seat.